Good evening. Welcome to Defacto Review on IMF World, a weekly roundup of news and current affairs here in Mongolia with our commentator and economist, Jalal Defacto.
Good evening.
And I'm An Tumurtov for MNB World. Today in our program, Capital Bank was liquidated earlier this week. What led to the decision and how will the closing of the bank will affect the banking sector? On Thursday, the 7th Mongolian Teachers Conference took place. We'll discuss the state of Mongolia's education sector. The Mongolian government shared details on the construction of the 414-kilometer railway from Taontotla to Zumbai in South Gobi. On to our first program, topic. On Monday, the Bank of Mongolia decided to liquidate the Capital Bank, having a substantial number of non-performing loans. The bank's closing impacted more than 165,000 debit accounts and 56,000 saving accounts. Capital Bank is relatively a small bank that makes up around roughly 1.1% of Mongolian banking system's assets. However, the banking sector makes up more than 90% of Mongolian financial sector. So, my first starting question is, why did the bank fail? Was the qualitative assessment from the International Monetary Fund the main factor in affecting the liquidation?
Well, Mongolia is under this program of IMF.
Yes.
For 3 years. 1.5 year time has passed. Within this 1.5 year, they were able to make asset quality report from all banks. Mm-hmm. And then they decided about the need of increasing own capitals of the bank. So we need more capitalization of commercial banks, which was happening, and it was announced the end of last year. All banks are done, and now we are waiting for independent report on how they made this capitalization. Mm-hmm. But it turned out one or two, it's a couple of banks, they say, is not doing enough to increase the quality of their assets, and they have not, looks like, increased the capital required. So Capital Bank, which had, according to Minister of Finance, for last 4 years having problems. Mm-hmm. So notice, he knew 4 years ago the bank has a problem. And what he said, the Minister of Finance, that it has about 4 years of problem. And since 2016, no state money was put into this bank. Mm. But however, in 2014, there was 104 billion pension fund of money.
Mm. And I think it also in 2013 also, right?
Yeah, they have been increasing. And also 135 billion the insurance, health insurance money, total 240 billion public money, public fund money was inside of the bank. And they have been increasing 2013, 2014 by 100 billion tugriks from the retirement bank, pension fund, how we call it. And this fund was put there, this amount by Irden, who is now currently the head of Mongolian Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And that time he was the head of human development and the social protection ministry.
Yes.
So at that time he was saying that everything is by law. Mm-hmm. So how come that the small banks, not only looks like Capital Bank, other smaller banks have state money funds. Mm-hmm. And also Mongolian Development Bank put there 52 billion. Okay? But also 2014 inside of the bank.
Capital, yes.
And other thing, 47 billion from the fund to support the famous well-known fund for supporting small medium enterprises. And 2 schools put their money, the medical school, medical university, and the education university. Mm-hmm. Medical 4, education 2 billion. So altogether we have 340 billion public money inside of the bank, which was announced bankrupt.
Yes.
Serious issue. And also there are deposit holders, 7 deposit holders, But unfortunately, 99.5% of those are covered by deposit insurance corporations, which is covering up to 20 million Tugriks deposits of every 7 deposits of every customer. But there are only a few 0.5% customers, probably a couple of hundred or so, customers who has more than 20 billion. So now the bank liquidation process is going on. The central bank representative is there sitting now. I mean, now he's replacing every leadership there. So I mean, we know this, we have been in our history since 1990, about 20 commercial banks bankrupt.
Yes, yes.
But each time it was very painful process, of course.
Yes, I think people joked about how like when each party comes into power, one bank always go bankrupt.
Yep, coincidentally or
Yes.
somehow. But however, it raises serious questions. You know, we have 2 tier banking systems, central bank, which is supervising the commercial banks, 14 of them now. And this is their duty to make sure that they are functioning in the right way, which they certainly have some flaws once the bank is bankrupt. Yeah, it has bankrupt. But on the other hand, all the state enterprises, state-owned companies, ministries, they have an account in so-called banks. It's called state, not the state bank, as we know, but it's called Turinsang State Fund. It's also a kind of bank, but it is not only commercial. It's just transaction bank. So those officials who run state money like these funds, if they want to have more profit on that, they put our money, public money, to the commercial banks. And we don't have, certainly with the purpose to gain interests. And which interest they are earning, nobody knows, not clear. They have a report, they have a contract with the commercial banks, but in early 2000s, there were rumors that these people were making 2 contracts. They were benefiting also themselves privately. So probably, in any case, it is a part of making Mongolia corrupt. And so state should have a very clear procedure how much this guy has to put into the commercial banks. Because if state is 31% of Mongolian economy.
Yes.
So this in GDP that is by the state, the largest employer. So how can the state compete with the private companies to earn money in the commercial banks? And what is the guarantee that they will not be misused, which is happening now here in this case? Yeah. So we need clear procedure and differences between private enterprises and public enterprises. How do they have prudent their funds?
So how will this decision, like liquidating Capital Bank, affect other commercial banks? What kind of message is Mongol Bank sending to the other banks?
Okay, first of all, as you said, it's just 1% of the banking system.
Yes.
So it is not that catastrophic. Principally, it is okay. They will overcome. Secondly, the message is to other commercial banks, particularly those banks who have problem with the loan and the repayment, etc. Because Capital Bank, 80% of the loan was non-performing, non-performing loans. So this is the first message. The second message is the commercial banks should follow the rules and laws, procedures. Otherwise, it is no good. That's the message, I think, coming to the commercial banks. But to the government of Mongolia, the message comes like, don't compete with private sector, don't make money on the money. Because, say, the insurance, health insurance or retirement, it's usually the largest fund in the country. Because everybody put money there and keep it for years. Particular retirement you pay now and you get it in 30 years. So that 2 funds, insurance fund, health insurance fund, the retirement fund, together are drivers of, they should be they must be under special management, professional management, who can invest substantial part either here or abroad for good intention of increasing their fund. In particular, developing country like Mongolia, where we have inflation about 7-8%, which is regarded somehow normal, which is not. If the money makes more than, the money should make more than this inflation rate.
Yes.
Otherwise, I pay now and I get the same amount of money or less worth money later on, which we do now all together. So state has the signal. Beware, first example, of this situation, and make sure the difference between commercial banks and the state fund. Okay.
So who like basically when this bank got liquidated, the state had to basically help save the other people's accounts, basically, right? And then
no. The state is not responsible for savings of deposits of people in the commercial banks. For that, there is special function system is created called Depository Insurance Corporation of Mongolia, which is taking some taxes from commercial banks in obligatory way, and then they cover the cost. They cover the deposit of up to 20 billion. Those who has more than 20 billion, they need to again apply, but it will take a time because these people get first the bad performing loan, non-performing loan, bad loan. They should be paid back. They cannot pay. Then they according to our law, they should be collateral, certain property that they can bought the money, got the credit against. So you need to sell those properties. So depending on how much money paid from creditors and how much money paid or proceeds from the selling of the property, in the same manner, the same rate, this money goes to depositors who has more than 20 million tugriks.
I see. So my last question on this topic is that who should take responsibility for capital bank's failure, and did Mongol Bank, the central bank, adequately monitor capital bank?
The previous leaders of commercial bank, central bank, could have already red flag when, in 2014, for example, the retirement fund, 100 billion tugriks go to this small commercial bank. They should alert already by that time that what's happening. Why such a big money goes here? Which they did not. So the previous governor had not done it for those 2 years, knowing that this was the case. And then next new leadership have not corrected that mistake on time. And then meanwhile, things were coming up and up, adding up to the level that 200 more billion credit is gone, is bad. And first, secondly, who will if the owner, unfortunately, with this bank, a family owns this bank.
Yes.
And the husband runs the bank.
Yes, husband and son.
Which is substantial contradiction against the Basel recommendations, which the Mongol bank are supposed to warn them, stop them if necessary. Because when the owner and executive director is the same person, there's a less chance to have good loan through proper credit committee procedures. So if out of this bad, not performing loans, if they have a loan to the company that related to them, it's going to be a very big problem. Because those who is related to the owners of the bank, the loan coming to them should be less than 5% their own capital. If they have violated this limits, then they will have double responsibility. Then it will give the right to go after the owner's other property. So that's how I see.
So hopefully some justice will come out of this. Okay, moving on to our second topic. From April 11th to 12th, the seventh Mongolian Teachers Conference was held at the State Palace. Representatives from the kindergarten schools, non-governmental organizations, educational associations participated in the conference. The main purpose of the conference was to listen to the voices of teachers. In addition, the Ministry of Education and related agencies presented key policies and programs to the education sector's representatives and teachers. So, on this matter, you actually wrote about the importance of teachers and how it affects the development of a nation. Can you talk about that on this?
Yeah, my line was, what is the main property, asset of the country, of a nation? It's their people.
Yes.
And those people are prepared from very early childhood through education system by teachers. So to have this wealth done, develop it well, you need to develop the teacher.
Yes.
So I said, the teacher's development is the country's development. That's the line. And for that, I was comparing Mongolia, for example, how much we are helping to develop our teacher. Then the question comes, in terms of spending money, I have compared 4 countries, Finland, which is #1 in the world, then second, Estonia, third, Israel. Per GDP, 5.2% Estonia, 7.1 Finland, 5.9 Israel, Mongolia 4.2. So Mongolia could increase twice that what we spend for education from our GDP. It's about on the level of it 4.2%. It could be 8, par to the Finland, for example, which has the best education. In terms of government budget, those countries, Estonia 13%, Finland 12.5, Israel 15, Mongolia 12.4. So we easily and we must increase our expense for education because we are preparing our future generations and future Mongolians.
Do you think this conference pointed these figures, and maybe was this conference a good sign to a better direction than now?
You know, this Congress of Teachers happened in 23 years.
Yes.
23 years. In number 7th Congress.
Yes.
And the government decided to make this Congress every 5 years. And what is good is during the conference, government met also on cabinet meeting, and then they also will spend more money for education, in particular for developing teachers. Mongolia will create new center for retraining teachers. And it looks like more will pay attention to the research of the education, etc., which was a good news. And in particular, when we talk about preparing teachers, we should talk about the preschool teachers and students. You know, good thing is Mongolia 84% covering up to 6 years old kids having preschool education.
Yes, I think it's one of the
average
best.
in Asia 50%.
Yes.
Which is good. We out of this scarce money of the budget for education.
Yes.
Quarter of them we spent for preschool education, which is good news.
Yes.
But we need to increase overall volume of that expenses.
And how can we do that, basically?
For example, what I was suggesting is, now it turned out Mongolia has a lot of private schools.
Yes, we do.
And public schools. And now what is recently the development show of these schools is there's a huge differences in quality. So what does it say? We need to bring public schools to this level. For that, we should stop practice of paying for private school students per student unit money, and to take this money, put into public sector, because we have many schools having 3 shifts.
Yes, we do. We do a lot of public schools.
35 schools, public schools, more than 8,500 students go to the third shift, out of which 85% are primary schools, which means that the youngest student goes the latest home after the 3rd shift, which is unacceptable.
And also they have lots of congestion, a lot of students in one class.
over 15
Yes,
cases. So that's why we cannot have that luxury of paying the children of parents who are wealthy to pay, you know, some schools that cost now $10,000. And some international school costs $20,000 school. It's almost like university.
It's besides the government
and then
money.
Still the government is giving money to the schools. I think we should stop this practice, not because we don't love these children, not just because the money is not enough here. Yeah. We have poor families. And we have poor areas where we have 3-shift schools, which is unacceptable. In more than 50 people, what do you expect from the quality of the teacher? So, teaching, I mean.
So, on that regard, how does Ulaanbaatar has a lot of excessive schools, and maybe also a lot of Mongolians, a lot of rural area people would come to Ulaanbaatar to find better schooling for their children. And do you think, how does the extensive concentration of schools in Ulaanbaatar affect the rural areas?
The point is, only 30% of schools are in Ulaanbaatar city.
Yes.
But 45% of population in the city.
Yes.
Logically, the schools have more children than any other place. Ulaanbaatar have not enough schools. Countryside have not enough students. And why? Because we have lost the whole concept of regional development of Mongolia. There is a policy, but it was not supported by decentralization of money. For example, local IMAGs, if they don't remain half of the taxes, all taxes they are staying there, all taxes, half of them at least not staying there, they cannot build up social infrastructure. If they have tax power, taxing power, they could have, against that issue, local development bonds. With the money, they can create schools, roads, which will make eventually their life better there, so people are not running away from these local areas coming to Ulaanbaatar. And those who is not enough, Ulaanbaatar is so much packed, and no less opportunity for jobs, because there's too much corrupt state, the private sector cannot thrive. So then people run away to Korea and doing some jobs that Koreans hate to do. What is that? Why we cannot make this country a country where everybody wants to live happily, can work hard? Instead, that's the situation we have. First, tax issue. Second, it's again, of course, again, the quality of local schools. So these two things must be done to have more students in countryside.
Okay. Speaking of proper government allocation of funds, let's move on to our third topic. On Wednesday, the cabinet voted to build a 414-kilometer railway from Taontolga to Zhumbaya in the South Gobi. The Mongolian Railways will issue a 750 billion MNT in bonds from Idnis Taontolga's 2018 net income. The construction of the railroad will be carried out by the General Staff of the Mongolian Armed Forces. The Minister for Road and Transport and Development, Ilham Aliyev, said that the railway's construction would cost $1.2 million per kilometer, $1 million per kilometer, 3 times less than expected. So, was this the right decision by the government to build this road to Zhumbaya, and maybe not? Why not to Qashunsuhat? Was this? Should the construction? Where should the first railroad should have been gone to? Actually,
the construction of railway should be there where they have started, and they have started a long time ago. 270 kilometers line from South Gobi, straight to the south border.
Yes,
but somehow this money was embezzled. Few people went to prison, but at the end. For example, one subcontractor, Samsung Korean company subcontractor,
Samsung
CNT. The guy was imprisoned for a few days or a couple of months.
And he was
then
fined.
At the end, he was fined only for 30 million.
Yes, to 30 million MNT.
And he had damaged 30 million US dollar,
Yes.
and he got only 30 million Tugriks.
Yes,
Now, how does it work? Where is the money gone at the end? We know one thing. We have paid for this road through our taxes. Every Mongolian is paid. It is money of Genghis Khan bond we paid. But what happened with the road? Why nobody is taking responsibility? And it was when the president was a minister of road and road transportation.
Yes.
And so now we are just simply ask questions. Please complete your first job. Then you go to the second one, to the east. At the end, China is the closest our buyer of everything what we produce. And on this road, instead of 3,500 trucks, we have 15,000 trucks, because all politicians got permissions and they all buy. They made their companies now. They are killing each other on the same road. On the road, every day some accident, and people dying. And this Tsaganhat, the place where before the border they defile all coal and file back on the truck, disaster. It's natural disaster. And so for the just humanitarian purpose, they should complete the first one. On the second one to the east, by the way, I was writing an article in 2013, like Mongolia will be next Panama. Why? Because these two neighbors, two giant on two sides neighbors, have different gauge of railways. They will never accept each other. And Mongolia is the only country with 2,000 long, I mean, the length country, the border-wise 4,000 more kilometers. But Mongolia is the nature place where these two different gauges to meet.
Yes.
And we want to have the services done in Mongolia, which is quite a value-added thing. So all the roads go to the south, must have Chinese gauge, all to the north, Russian gauge.
Yes.
When they meet in the middle of the territory, and in particular in between, we should have 4 rails so that both can go. So that's the concept. Actually, this is the concept the state already made. So
why this decision to make this railway? Does this have anything to do with Vladimir Putin's, Russian President Vladimir Putin's planned visit to Mongolia?
Yeah, he is, we say, is coming in August to celebrate 2-3 events in Mongolia. Yeah. But I was just to remind you that 5 years ago, when he had visited 2014 September, there was a contract signed by Yakunin, who was the head of Russia Rail, and the Mongolia Gansu, who was the Minister of Road Transportation. They signed an agreement which says that UB railway corridor will have a capacity of 100 million tons per year go through Mongolia, or I mean on this railway, and they were promising electrification of UB railway and to make two parallel paths, which they did not happen. So I'm asking questions. What the heck they are writing down contract signing if they don't implement after 5 years? So is it another show or another lie? That's the question of Mongolian people to ask Mongolian and the Russian government, both presidents, because these two governments own this railway, which is running with a great loss. So stop that practice, not lie, do the jobs. You cannot sell it, then we will take care of it, the people.
Okay. Unfortunately, we can't answer that question anytime soon. And on that note, that's all the time we have for today on Defacto Review on MMB World. We'll see you next week on MMB World.
You can rewatch the program from tomorrow on Facebook Live, and also visit jargaldefacto.com, where you can read also the newspaper, the De Facto Gazette. Thank you.